Joining us now is the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. Mr. Vice President, thank you for taking the time. Congratulations on what you and the President achieved yesterday. Walk our audience through the significance and the profundity and your role in helping achieve peace between Israel and Iran.
Well, thanks so much, Charlie, for having me. It's good to talk with you. And really all credit goes to the President here. I mean, he had a very clear goal in mind. He wanted to destroy the Iranian nuclear program. He did that militarily. Of course, we tried to do it diplomatically, but the Iranians were not willing to play ball. But he also wanted us to be in a very narrow, very defined operation where once we solved the problem, he wanted to get the hell out and not have to deal with the Middle East anymore. And I think that's what you saw here is you saw bold, decisive action, but you also saw a willingness to sort of press the brakes on both the Iranians and the Israelis. You know, what happened, I think it was very interesting. I came into the Oval Office on Monday morning, and we had just received calls from both the Israelis, but also from the Iranians. And from the Israelis, they were basically saying, look, we're exhausted. We don't want to do this anymore. And we've achieved our military objective. They were quite successful, as you know, but they didn't want to keep on going. And I think from the Iranians, they were saying, well, we're going to do this counterattack, but it's going to be largely symbolic. This is where we're going to strike. They basically telegraphed exactly what they were going to do so that we could maximize our ability to save the lives and the health of our troops. And so what the President basically said is, let's figure out what the Iranians are actually doing. Let's obviously do everything that we can to save our troops. And then after the attack, let's reconvene and see where we are. And so we went to the Oval Office around 3 o'clock or so yesterday afternoon. The President kind of gathered up the senior team and said, look, the Iranians clearly didn't mean to kill anybody because they told us exactly where they were going to attack. The Israelis are telling us they've achieved their objectives and they don't want to do a long, protracted war. Let's go and get a ceasefire done. And then 3 hours later, that's exactly what we had accomplished. And hilariously, we were working on confirming and coordinating the details of this as I was on the way to do an interview with Brett Baer. And then I think the President got this over the finish line literally while I was on air. And then it was read to me right before we actually started recording the interview. So a really big day for America,
Incredible.
A really big day, I think, for Israel and Iran, but just a big day for world peace, Charlie. I mean, I can't emphasize how big of a deal it is that we took the Iranian nuclear program, we destroyed it without losing a single American life and without getting the United States involved in some protracted Middle Eastern conflict. It's kind of a win-win-win all around.
And so, Mr. Vice President, I've known the President for about 10 years. I have never seen him this mad publicly, where he dropped basically the F-bomb heard around the world at both Israel and Iran. What do you think led to that? He wanted the ceasefire so badly. He wants peace. His driving force is peace, not war, which is such a sea change versus the prior Republican Party. Can you comment on President Trump this morning as he was demanding an end to all conflict, and it worked? Please.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, ceasefires are always a little bit of mess, Charlie, and we don't even know fully exactly what happened. I mean, our understanding is that you know, the Israelis obviously tried to ramp up their campaign towards the very end. The Iranians took a lot of shots at the Israelis at the very end. You know, there are some concerns here because, you know, even after the senior leaders agree to a ceasefire, it takes some time for that message to get down to the commanders in the field. You know, even if the leadership of Iran, for example, says, yes, okay, we'll stop shooting, it's totally possible that there's a guy they can't reach who doesn't realize that. And so it's not even clear totally what happened, but there appears to be one errant rocket that the Israelis perceived was fired at them. It did not land. It did not do any damage. This was the very last rocket the Iranian shot. And then it seemed like the Israelis were going to do this massive response. And the President, you saw this morning, had just been, and I called him 5 minutes before this press conference, and we talked about it. And I think the President was just like, this is ridiculous.
Totally.
These guys are exhausted. Both of them want to stop fighting. This stupid tit for tat is unacceptable. And I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to make it very clear to each party that this needs to stop. And obviously, you know, it's an amazing thing to have an American president who just goes out there and says, this is what's in America's best interest. This is what's smart. The parties should choose the smart path and not the dumb path. And he said it so forcefully that I actually think it meaningfully changed the trajectory of this morning, Charlie. I mean, just take you through my own psychology. At around 6:30 this morning, which is, I think, right around the time the president was going out, I was worried that this ceasefire would fall apart. You know, it was hard won. There was a lot of background that went into it. You go to bed, you think things are fine, you wake up and realize that they're not. And I really thought around 6:30 this morning the whole thing might fall apart. The president got it back on track as only he can do. It was really amazing.
Extraordinary. Last night, there were a lot of doomers, Mr. Vice President. There were a lot of doomers.
Yes, there were.
And they were like, oh, this thing's falling apart, and Persia's launching rockets, and it's past this. And I honestly, I turned my phone off at 1 a.m. Eastern. I said, I'm done. I said, I'm just going to trust the Lord and trust Trump, who I think has the hand of God on him to settle this thing. So, Mr. Vice President, I want to ask you the complexity of being able to have no nuclear program for Iran, to have no troops on the ground, no nation building, and no U.S. troops. I mean, that's pitching a perfect game. I hope everyone in the audience understands how unique and rare this is. Mr. Vice President, can you add more detail to that? Because to have all those no's, no troops on the ground, no permanent war, no quagmire, no U.S. troops dead, and no nukes for Iran, that is a dream.
Yeah, that's right. It really is a dream, Charlie. And I think you and I are similar age. We grew up in the same generation. I think a lot of people in our generation assume that every single time we do anything in the Middle East that is necessarily going to lead to some protracted quagmire.
Totally.
And the president was just not interested in that. And I think that, yes, the president deserves great credit for destroying the nuclear program and pressing the reset on the Iranian nuke program. But I actually think he pressed the reset button on a generation of failed American foreign policy. He basically said it is actually possible for Americans to go and do important things in the American interest and then to get out.
Hold that thought.
And
Mr.
that
Vice
is
President,
something that's really profound.
We'll be back in 10 seconds. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Yep. Okay, so Mr. Vice President, sorry, we had a radio break. Mr. Vice President, continue that thought here, though, and comment further. Sorry to cut you off, but our generation understandably has a ton of skepticism. We think of Middle East, long, expensive, we're war weary, and we're demonstrating under the MAGA doctrine, actually, there's a third way.
That's exactly right, Charlie. And you, of course, have heard some of the president's supporters and even the president himself, me, have been attacked as isolationists. And then you had people sort of attacking us and saying that we were going to get involved in another forever war. And what I saw privately and publicly was a president who said, what do we need to do to accomplish America's interests? Let's go and do it, and then let's get out. And that basic idea that you can go and do great things, the American military is incredibly powerful. I mean, what these B-2 bombers accomplished, Charlie, is really extraordinary. They flew halfway across the world, dropped 30,000-pound bombs, 12 of them, on ventilation shafts that were literally the size of a washing machine, and then got out without ever landing. They never landed the entire mission. They did aerial refueling. It's an amazing, testament to American military power, but the president used that military power to accomplish something that mattered to the American people. He's been saying it for 10 years. We can't let Iran get a nuclear weapon. He accomplished it, and now he's moving on, I think, to build more peace and more prosperity all across the Middle East. I think he showed the Iranians that they're not nearly as tough as they might think that they are. I think that he showed the Israelis that we're willing to use American power for our interests, but we're not going to get involved in another Middle East quagmire. And I think that combined message is going to hopefully lead to a period of great peace and prosperity in the Middle East, which, of course, will be great for the United States. That'll mean, more investment, more prosperity, more people building businesses in the Middle East is great for America. More war is terrible for America, and the president threaded the needle perfectly.
One final question. I know I have to let you go. Mr. Vice President, a lot of the base now is saying we need domestic wins, domestic. And by the way, we had to do this whole Iran-Israel thing, the way the president handled it. What are the top domestic priorities for this administration? Mass deportations, no tax on tips. Walk us through the marching orders for this audience so that we can really put the thrust and the energy and the velocity here domestically.
Yeah, of course, we have our big legislative priority, which is no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, but also a massive amount of funding for the border wall and for other immigration enforcement. It's impossible, I think, really to do mass deportations unless you get some more money into Border Patrol, resources that have been really depleted under the Biden administration and not reinvested in our own security. As you know, Charlie, I think the most important domestic policy issue, the reason why Donald J. Trump is the 47th president of the United States, is the need to, one, stop the mass invasion, and two, deport the people who were let in during Biden's mass invasion. The president's very committed to that. And the number that really matters, Charlie, is net migration numbers.
Totally.
If you look,
that's right.
For the first time in a very long time, we have fewer people coming into the country than we are getting out of the country. That shows that we've stopped the flow of illegal immigration and we're starting the deportations. And that, to me, is the most important thing. It's the metric by which we'll be judged. Obviously, you've seen the courts try to stop this stuff, but we're starting to get enough wins in courts that I think if we get the big, beautiful bill passed, you're going to see an accelerating approach to deportations as we implement that most important part of the agenda.
I love it. Mr. Vice President, congratulations on playing a role in history. We have your back. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much.
Charlie, thanks, man. Take care.
There's a lot of talk about what's happening in Israel right now. Hostages being released, terrorists resurfacing, Gaza plans, and so on. But there's one thing we tend to overlook: the people of Israel. The war has taken a huge physical and emotional toll on the Jewish people. And that's why I want you to know about the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. And I want you to support the important work they do. IFCJ is on the ground throughout Israel, providing food and life-saving aid to the sick and elderly, even released hostages and their families. Join with me and visit ifcj.org/learn more. That's why we work so hard. And by the way, here at the Bitcoin.com studio, it's one of the reasons why we work so hard to get J.D. Vance as vice president. His prudence, his precision, his temperament, his understanding of all the issues. He truly is a thought leader for a generation. Now, whether he will be the next president or not, it's too early to do that. Look, I'm 100% behind him if that's what he decides to do. We have governing in front of us. We have to pass the big, beautiful bill. We have to get to mass deportations. And what President Donald Trump pulled off in the Middle East is extraordinary, to say the least. It's extraordinary. It's breathtaking. J.D. Vance's ability to articulate the president's agenda is second to none. And understand, J.D. Vance is right in alignment with the president. He is about violent, precise, short action, but does not want long quagmires or continued conflicts. And he is a master-class communicator. As we are putting together our summer program, our Student Action Summit program, I don't think JD will be able to join for this one. Maybe, maybe not. But, he's got a lot of stuff going on. The summer is, by the way, a lot of times people joke around in government. Summer doesn't happen a lot. This is like a rapid pace summer. You got wars, you got big, beautiful bill, you got taxes, you got border, you got deportations. And J.D. Vance represents the best of the future of our party. And just so everyone understands, we've taken a leadership role the last couple of weeks. We have not engaged in name calling, except that's not true. I did name call two people, Lindsey Graham and James Lankford. That's true. I did name call Lindsey Graham and James Lankford. Besides that, it's been very nasty online. If you haven't noticed, people hurling insults and all this stuff after each other. But I think that there is a moment of reconciliation. J.D. Vance was not a Trump supporter originally, and that was actually the argument I made to the president as to why I think J.D. Vance would make a great vice president. It shows that there can be reconciliation and that people can come on board. We want former people that weren't Trump supporters to become Trump supporters. I mean, look at that shot right there. That's Team America right there. That's Team Peace. That is Team Western Civilization. Secondly, I think it's a very, very important point that is lost on people, is that the vice president does a lot of diplomacy. Do you know that J.D. Vance was intimately involved in the peace settlement? Intimately involved with the peace settlement between Israel and Iran, working with the Qataris, the right-hand man. And what a difference it is from Mike Pence. Mike Pence right now would be beating the drums of war, saying that we need regime change privately. Publicly, he'd send out some statement that is just superficial and nonsensical. J.D. Vance is consistent with the MAGA base because his lived experience is MAGA. He is from Appalachia. He is from the hills of Ohio. He is from a broken family. He understood deindustrialization. He understood drug use. He understood abuse. Served in the military, went to Yale, educated himself, never forgot where he came from, as becoming Ohio senator. I mean, it's one of the most incredible, authentic journeys and stories we've ever seen. A blue-collar upbringing all the way up to the vice president of the United States. Just look at that picture right there. You could not fathom two guys that have more in common and more not in common than Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. One born to a broken home with no money. Donald Trump, billionaire. Look at that difference. One was destined to redefine the skyline of New York. The other one was destined for failure, but he rose above it. However, they do have something in common that people forget. They are both class traitors. Both J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, they have defected from the ruling class. J.D. Vance was he spoke at the Aspen Institute. Everyone loved him. A hillbilly elegy. Oh my goodness, J.D. Vance, tell us about, how great everything is, and Donald Trump's terrible, and explain to us why white working class people are in such revolt. He got a Netflix movie. And yet J.D. Vance defected from all of that to become Donald Trump's vice president and a stalwart defender. And just honestly, he's such a good person. There's so much that gets said about politicians. He's a great person. When J.D. calls me, it's just like talking to a normal guy. It's not like talking to one of these senators. It's just like so exhausting. It's so scripted. It's real. It's raw. It's authentic. It's personal. He's always asking, hey, how's your family? How are your kids? And Donald Trump is very much the same. But we are blessed and we are lucky. And Donald Trump deserves credit because he went out on a limb. Remember, there was this major pressure campaign during the Veep stakes, and we did everything we could on this program. I mean, we were all in at like a hyper-aggressive level, both privately and publicly. And President Trump, he resisted all of the yammering, all of the clamoring, and he said, I think JD's the guy. It was a huge risk, and he was attacked out of the gate. And now J.D. Vance's favorables are 55+%, as they should be. He's becoming a true statesman, and I'm honored to call him a friend.